Hey, what's up guys? So I'm going to talk about the Trinity. That would be the three best spell cards in the game that every deck can really use. And those three cards are Heavy Storm, Darkhole, and Monster Reborn. Now I kind of want to just talk about these cards, and then I want to have like kind of a discussion at the very end that can apply to like the metagame in Yu-Gi-Oh! So first off, let's go ahead and talk about Monster Reborn because we're already checking it out. So I feel like this card, it puts you in positions where you shouldn't be allowed to go into, especially when we have Darkhole as a legal card, because when Darkhole is a legal card, you can just go Darkhole into Reborn and then secure superior field advantage into the game, and you can usually OTK in scenarios that you're not allowed to OTK, or you can make plays that you're not supposed to be able to make because you can get that extra monster, and you can pretty much synchro XYZ into pretty much whatever you want, and there's no real downside to Monster Reborn other than maybe you using it too early and your opponent punishes you by chaining a max C. Maybe you're playing some XYZ or Synchro deck and you activate Monster Reborn, you're going to have to let them draw, 2 to 3 cards depending on what deck you're playing. Now I feel like Monster Reborn has always been a card where it was one of those win harder cards. Like, it wasn't necessarily a card that was, fair. It's kind of like, I've got field advantage right now, oh, let me activate Monster Reborn, I can go for game. And I think that is just too mean, especially in some of the mirror matches. If you can steal key monsters to XYZ or Synchro for anything, it's just too good of a card. Now, next up, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Darkhole. So, Darkhole, pretty simple effect. I mean, there's no downside to any of these cards, really, other than perhaps Darkhole and Heavy Storm can get Starlight Roaded or Huge Revolutioned. But that said, Darkhole is a great card, I feel like, because it punishes players who overextend and they do it improperly. Like, they go for game, but then, or actually, no, let's put it this way. They go for huge amounts of damage where it's not game and you could still survive, and then you Darkhole and then you go for your play and then you beat them because of that. And I really like using Darkhole by, punishing my opponent for making a play they shouldn't have made, because it's a fantastic card. And the only problem I have with this card is in conjunction with Monster Reborn. Like, these cards together just set you up for games, you shouldn't really be able to win. Like I mentioned before, I feel like Monster Reborn and Darkhole, they can steal games when they're used together because you've officially cleared out the entire board, unless maybe they have like a Tyrus and they can't, you can't destroy Tyrus or Tyrus with card effects. But generally, when you use Darkhole and Reborn together, I feel like it really is too dirty, because you could actually, just OTK your opponent. And even early on in the game, sometimes when, for example, you would say summon something like Thunder King, and then you set back row, and maybe your opponent happens to be playing, a deck like Six Samurai or Wind Up, and then they go, oh, Darkhole your Thunder King, and you're like, wow. That's so annoying because, I mean, even though you didn't overextend or anything, your best card right there, which completely would have, won the game, just shut them down. But you could say the same thing about, Macrocosmos and MST. And MST's at 3, but Darkhole definitely a much stronger card than MST. Now that we're talking about spell and trap destruction, let's go ahead and talk about Heavy Storm. Now, I feel like this card, out of the whole Trinity, this card actually wins games, or puts the players in a position where they don't want to play stuff on the field, because Heavy Storm is such a nasty card. I feel like if I was to choose one out of the 3 cards to run, like if I could only pick one, I would hands down pick Heavy Storm. I feel like this card wins games more than anything. The only downside to Heavy Storm is in the player's hands that need to make a play. Let's say they have no playable cards and there's only one backfield. You have to use Heavy Storm, because if you get warning, perhaps there are situations where you can lose. Like if you open up Triple Shine Ball and you just don't have a playable hand, like you need that. You have, let's say for example you have a whole bunch of other dead cards. You've got Triple Shine Ball in your hand, and you've got Earth in your hand. You need your Summon of Earth to add the Venus. So, you Heavy Storm and you just, summon the Earth and you add Venus. Like, you're in a position where you really need to make a play. That's where Heavy Storm can kind of be bad, because you're using a power card too early, which then allows your opponent to set as much back row as possible. Well, I mean, they probably will be setting more than one card now that they know Heavy Storm is gone. And I really feel like, because MST is at 3, no one really plays Night Beam anyways, but because Mystical Space Typhoon is at 3, the problem with Heavy Storm being a legal card right now is if you set 1, it always gets MST, because there's so many strong decks that like to put a lot of aggressive things on the field, and they can stun you, and you know, they run 3 MST. So if you set 1, you're gonna MST. If you set 2, you can just straight up lose to Heavy Storm. That's just a thing that happens in Yu-Gi-Oh. So I really feel like Heavy Storm, by far, even though it's supposed to have like the balanced effect that it destroys, you know, all spell trap on both sides of the field. Although generally you usually use it to your advantage, where your opponent has lots of cards and you only have maybe 1, and you just go for the Heavy Storm anyways. Even though you're losing 1 of your own cards, it's still worth it in the end to activate the Heavy Storm. Now I honestly feel like Heavy Storm, you know, is kind of a problematic card because a lot of these decks, they're not playing any back row, and if they're playing any back row, it's chainable back row anyways. But there's so many other decks, like, for example, Macro Rabbit. Sometimes that deck opens up terrible. I've seen so many players, like, they'll open up with a vanilla monster and so many other back row, and they're like, well, if I protect my normal monster, I can make a Lagia or Dolka next turn. So, you know, I'm going to set my Lance, I'm going to set my Bottomless, I'm going to set a Torrential or something like that. Because if you only set 1, it'll just get MST, and that's the problem. And if you set 2, you know, if they MST the other card, let's say that you set, like, a... you summon like a Sabersaurus, you set a Lance and a Torrential. Maybe they're going to MST your Lance, and then they summon a monster. Are you really going to Torrential? Depending on what monster it is, you might do it. And then you've lost your Sabersaurus anyways, so you're not utilizing that Torrential to its potential. And that's really just a problem with Heavy Storm, in my opinion, at the moment. I feel like this is probably the best spell card in the game at the moment. So, because I wanted to discuss with these like Trinity cards with you, I wanted to ask you guys, if Konami ever made a different like ban list, more so you being able to choose which card you wanted to run. So let's say, for example, out of the Trinity, like these would be in like their own ban section. There's Heavy Storm, Darkhole, and Monster Reborn. You could only pick one. What do you guys think about that? If, you know, Konami actually utilized the idea of, you know, this card is too powerful, you can only choose one of them, because, you know, Konami always likes to ban and unban all 3 of these cards. They just go in and out. I'd say Monster Reborn is a fantastic card as well. Darkhole obviously is a pretty good card, but if you're playing against a great player, the thing with Darkhole, you usually won't be able to utilize it as well unless you, you know, maybe drop a Gorge just to survive for the turn, and then, you know, they attack over Gorge, attack over your token, you're like, it's fine, I can Darkhole you, and, you know, I'm good from there. But generally, I feel like Heavy Storm is too powerful of a card, even though there's so many decks that don't play back row at the moment, and that kind of is the problem. You know, there's not a lot of decks that run tons and tons of back row that are actually too successful in the game right now. I mean, we have... right now in the metagame, spellbooks are very popular. They don't really care for back row other than Fate, and that's trainable anyways. And that's pretty much a spell card. I mean, it's not really a trap, but it, you know, it's trainable, so it's still great in that aspect. Spellbooks and E-Dragons and Mermails are still going to be the most popular deck. And Mermails back row, I mean, occasionally they'll play Torrentials, but it's generally those Abyss Spheres. And that's the problem, like I said, with Heavy Storm. It causes a lot of decks like Gladiator Beast not to be playable. If you've ever played Gladiator Beast and they Heavy Storm you, you lose. Like, that's just how the deck plays. Because Gladiator Beast, usually you don't want to run too high monster count, you want to run lots of back row. And if you open up, you know, multiple Glad Beasts, and then, like, you know, let's say you open up like 2 Glad Beasts, 4 back row. You have to set your war trait, you have to set your bottomless. Sometimes other things just run over things without effects, because, like, if you summon Laquari, set... some of Laquari set like maybe 2 chariots to go, oh, summon Sabersaurus, run over your Laquari. It's just a problematic thing that can happen in the game. So, yeah, like I said, what do you think of that idea, guys? And if you guys could choose one of these, which one would you pick out of the Trinity? I personally feel like Heavy Storm is probably the best out of them. But, you know, depending on what deck you play, you might not... I don't know. Maybe, well, okay, I guess Chainburn might not need Heavy Storm, but, like, realistically, I think every deck would love to have Heavy Storm, as it's a fantastic card. But, anyways, let me know your thoughts on that idea of having these, like, 3 Trinity cards, because, unarguably, almost every deck plays these 3 cards. If you can only choose one in that idea of, like, a ban list, because, like, I was thinking, like, each deck could have like one boss monster as well. Like, you know, you can't play Dark Arm, BLS, Chaos Sorcerer all in the same deck, even though those cards are not nearly as strong as something like Judgment Dragon or any of the Elemental Dragons. But anyways, thanks for watching. Asian Ice signing out.